Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Daily Dose. We are rocking it today with day number 243. We have a little bit more than 100 days left, so we're moving right along. Matthew 15 and 16, that's our scripture for today. We've also got Psalm number 88 slid in there. We are going to be having a link down in the description for a read scripture video from our friends at the Bible Project. It's going to go into some more detail about the book of Matthew. So go click on that and show them some love by giving them a thumbs up on their YouTube channel. But let's jump in and see what we're looking at today. So the first section is about defiling and that which defiles. Okay? I'm going to start off right at the beginning of chapter 15 and just read a couple of verses here and there. It says, "Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, 'Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat.'" Okay, so as I understand this, and it's been a while since I studied the details about this, but essentially, you had the actual law, the commands that were in the Old Testament, but then there were also traditions of the elders, right? So they would clarify and sometimes elaborate on, and sometimes they would even make some of the commandments even more specific than what they initially were. So one of the traditions that they had was they would go through this elaborate hand washing ceremony, right? And this wasn't like, oh, go get some hand sanitizer, make sure your hands are clean, right? It had to do with, this almost a ceremonial type washing of their hands, and they would do it multiple times before they ate. And so apparently Jesus and his peeps were not going through this tradition, right? And so the Pharisees are like, hey, how come your people are not following our traditions? They're not washing their hands. Well, ultimately, Jesus calls out to the crowd, he calls to the crowd, he says, hey, come here, listen and understand. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what really defiles them. So here, Jesus is getting to the heart of the issue, right? I don't think that the Pharisees, when they were criticizing not washing the hands, I don't think they were complaining because of sanitary reasons. Like, hey, you guys might get sick, let's wash your hands good. And plus, I don't think they really had antibacterial soap back then, right? So yeah, they could rinse their hands off, which is better than nothing. Right? But anyways, you get my point, right? Washing hands back then, if they were just doing it with mere water, probably wouldn't have done a whole lot as far as, keeping them from getting sick and things like that. It was really about the traditions and these commandments of the Pharisees and the elders, right? And Jesus is saying, look, here's the deal. It's not what I put into my mouth, right? If I don't wash my hands and I've got some dirt on my hands and it goes into my mouth, that's not what defiles me, right? You guys have got this all wrong. It's not about the outward and not about what you put in yourself, so to speak, right? Not that as much as what comes out of the mouth, right? In other words, when you put something in your mouth, that's not going to defile you in and of itself. It's about what comes out of the mouth. And what comes out of the mouth? That which is in the heart and which is in the head, right? We speak out of our thoughts. We speak out of our feelings. We speak out of our heart, for lack of a better term, right? So Jesus is basically kind of in a roundabout way saying, look, y'all are so concerned about what you're putting in here, but you're not too concerned about what comes out, about what's really on the inside and what's really going on, and that is so much more important, okay? Anyways, moving on from there, we read about the faith of a Canaanite woman. So in verse 21, it says, "Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, 'Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly.'" Okay? And Jesus basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, hey, I came here to minister to the children of Israel, right? To the Jews. You are a Canaanite. So unfortunately, that's not part of my ministry right now. And so this lady goes on and persists and begs, and her persistence ultimately pays off, right? Jesus grants her request. But what I want you guys to see here is the fact that this lady acknowledges him as Lord, Son of David. And I believe that that was a messianic title, right? There's a number of times where people see Jesus and that's what they say. They say, Lord, Son of David. So it's almost like as a Canaanite, as a non-Jew, she was saying, hey, I understand and I believe you're the Messiah. Come and help a sister out, right? I just think it's interesting that she calls him Lord and then Son of David, right? Being kind of a messianic title. Then we come to a story about Jesus feeding the 4,000. Okay, so we've read about Jesus feeding the 5,000, right? There were a few loaves of bread, a couple fish, and he essentially was able to miraculously break those pieces over and over and over in order to fill up all these baskets to feed all kinds of people, lots of people. We have a very similar situation now, okay? But I believe that this is a different, I mean, if you're reading through Matthew, this is portrayed clearly as a separate incident. There has been some criticism over the years where people say, oh, well, both of these must have been the exact same account, and it just got mixed up and thrown into the book of Matthew and maybe some of the other Gospels twice. But it's talking about the same incident, right? I don't think that's the case for the simple fact that we have a clearly distinct number of people being fed, 5,000 versus 4,000. And there are some other differences as well. But here's what I notice, okay? It says, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way. His disciple answered, where could we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd? Okay, hello? Right? Isn't that the same thing basically his disciples said before he performed the miracle feeding the 5,000? Did they forget? Are they so excited about all the stuff that they're seeing that they can't remember what happened not that long ago where Jesus miraculously fed everyone? My guess is that, if you would have told me this story but stopped right before what the disciples said, I would have pictured the disciples going, oh, Jesus, remember what you did last time? Here, do it again. Do it again. But they didn't do that. They're like, where can we get enough bread to feed all these people? Come on, guys. Come on. Anyways, so after that scene plays out, then we read about a demand for a sign. Okay? So the Pharisees and Sadducees came to Jesus and tested him by asking him to show them a sign from heaven. You know what's interesting is that we have read time and time again that the Pharisees and Sadducees have been present witnessing signs, aka miracles, all the way up to this point from when Jesus started his public ministry, right? The Pharisees have seen his miracles. They've seen healings. They've seen things happen. But now, all of a sudden, they're demanding him to show them a sign. Well, what does Jesus say? He says, a wicked and adulterous generation looks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of Jonah. Jesus then left them and went away. So here, sign of Jonah, right? So we know Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days, and then he was brought back. He didn't actually die, as far as we know, right? He was just down there somehow surviving in the belly of this big fish, but then he was kind of regurgitated back up onto the shore, right? So Jesus is sort of predicting again what's going to happen when he dies, that he's going to be buried in the belly of the earth, right? For 3 days, and then he is going to be spit back out, right? He's going to be raised back to life. Then there's a somewhat comical section about the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, okay? Now, I don't remember if we've touched on this, but the Pharisees were like the old school rabbinic type dudes, okay? They were all about the law. They were experts in the law, and they were teachers of the law, okay? The Sadducees were similar, but they weren't quite the same, right? I believe that the Sadducees were kind of the remnant of the priestly class. So both the Pharisees and Sadducees were against Jesus, but they had differing opinions, right? Like, for example, the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in a bodily resurrection. And that kind of butted heads with some of the things that the Pharisees believed, right? So it's almost like they were two distinct denominations within Judaism, sort of, that had different interpretations of how things worked and slightly different doctrinal views on things, okay? So the Pharisees and the Sadducees were not best buddies, but they came together and teamed up when it came to trying to go against Jesus, right? So anyways, in chapter 16, verse 5, when they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread. Be careful, Jesus said to them. Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? And so the disciples were told that they discussed this amongst themselves. And they said, is it because we didn't bring any bread? Right? So they're talking about, man, we forgot to bring bread, right? Well, the first thing I noticed there is, okay, you've seen what Jesus has done in the past with bread and fish on multiple occasions. You forgot to bring bread. Do you think Jesus is going to be able to feed you? Probably, right? That's the first thing I take note of. But the second thing is they're actually talking about bread. And then Jesus is like, be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they're like, we didn't bring any bread? What's wrong? Is he saying we can't go buy bread from the Pharisees or the Sadducees? What's wrong with their bread? Is it contaminated? Right? That's kind of what the disciples are thinking. But we learn that Jesus is talking about the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? He's talking about the yeast that gets into the teaching, the stuff that they add, the incorrect information, the lies, the false doctrine, the stuff that's not good that gets interjected into their bread and kind of distorts and perverts all of it, right? That's what this is about. It's about be on your guard against the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So then we come to an interesting point where Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. And this is very interesting how this plays out, right? So Jesus is saying, who do people say that I am? And so the disciples are saying, well, some people say that, you're like John the Baptist reincarnated, or you're Elijah back from the dead, or, you're a great prophet, or you're a great teacher. And then Jesus says, but what about you? What about you? Who do you say that I am? And you know what, friends? I think that is probably the most important question that anyone can ask ever in your life and in my life, right? Who do you say that Jesus was? Who do you say that Jesus is? Because how you answer that question is largely going to determine how you spend eternity, right? So, friends, if you are wrestling with that question, you're not alone. A lot of people wrestle with that question. If you need some help answering that question, there are plenty of answers out there. You can reach out to me if you need to. Ask some questions down below in the comments. I'll be glad to help you out and try to answer those to the best of my ability. But friends, that is a question that you need to answer sooner rather than later. Who do you say that Jesus is? And Simon Peter answers, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Right? So basically, Peter is acknowledging exactly who Jesus is. You are the one who was promised. You are the promised Messiah who was promised in the Old Testament. Well, now you are him. You are the fulfillment. You are the Son of the living God. You are God in human flesh, is essentially what Peter is saying. Now notice, Jesus does not deny that, right? And again, if we go back to talking about, well, Jesus never claimed to be God, basically he did. And there are many more clear-cut cases than this, but this is one of those times. You will notice that when angels appear on the scene, from time to time, people will see these angels and they will freak out and get scared and they'll bow down and start like worshiping these angels. And when that happens, what is the first thing the angels always say? They say, hey, don't worship me. I'm not worthy to be worshipped. I'm not God. I am a created being just like you. They will not accept the worship of man, right? Well, here we basically see Jesus, and Peter is saying, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. You are the promised fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies, right? Well, if it wasn't true, I would think Jesus would be like, no, homie, you got it wrong. Don't be ascribing deity to me. That's a sin. But Jesus does not say that. He takes the He takes the answer and rolls with it. And he replies and said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." And that again goes to what we were recently reading about how Jesus says, no one knows the Father unless I reveal the Father to them, right? We're talking about election again, in a sense, right? We're talking about depravity. We're talking about not being able to know God because of our sinful nature until God takes the first step and draws us. Not collectively draws us, specifically individual pulls on the strings of our heart, right? And so then we go on from there, and Jesus predicts his death, okay? And I know I'm running a little bit over, but hey, that's okay, because this is all really important stuff. So I'll close with this. Jesus predicts his death, okay? It says, "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. 'Never, Lord,' he said, 'this shall never happen to you.'" And I think that this is also pretty weird, right? Okay, this is kind of weird because Peter is concerned about what Jesus is saying, like, never. They're not going to get their hands on you. They're not going to take you out. They're not going to kill you. They're not going to stop this movement. That's Peter's first inclination, it appears, right? But look at what Jesus said. He said that they're going to take him into their hands, and he's going to suffer many things, and he'll be killed, and on the third day he will be raised, right? The first thing that would have gone through my mind, I think, is, whoa, wait a minute. You're going to be raised back to life, Jesus? What? But Peter's not even registering that Jesus was like, yeah, I'm going to be killed, but then I'm going to be raised back to life. There's no mention of that, no question of that. Peter is just like, hey, may it never be, Lord. This won't happen to you, right? So anyways, that's all I got for y'all for today. Thanks for sticking with me. Appreciate your patience. And hey, until we meet again, I hope you have a good one. And if you haven't answered that question already, who do you say that Jesus is? Work on answering that question, friends. So until we meet again, deuces.